Hi guys, we're going to do something a little bit different today on Mac's channel. We've received a lot of comments asking for the knit and crochet patterns for some of Mac's sweaters that have appeared in some of our videos in the past, so I thought I'd run through one of my patterns on here today. So just to show you the parts of the sweater we're going to be working on today, we're going to use a raglan increase to make our sweater, which means that there will be no seam, there will be no pieces to sew together. We're going to use ribbing in 3 different places, and there's some armholes and an optional harness hole. So to get started, you're going to decide which size you're going to make. This sweater comes in 6 sizes, and I'll include a link to the pattern in the description below. I'm going to be making a size small for Mac today. To knit this, I'm going to use 5mm circular needles and some smaller 4mm circular needles, as well as some stitch markers. You can find the lengths for the cables, depending on which size you're making, in the description. A lot of you like the Edinburgh sweater in Mac's sweater weather video, so I'm going to be making a version of that with Bernat Premium Tweeds and Aran Tweed. Your 10 by 10 centimeter gauge swatch should be 18 stitches by 24 rows in stockinette, using 5mm needles or needles to meet the gauge. To begin, I'm going to use these straight needles just to show you how to do an alternating cable cast on. It'll make it a little easier to see what I'm doing. And then I'll transfer the stitches over to my smaller 4mm circular needle. You can see this cast-on method will make a nice edge that's perfect for ribbing. However, if you have a preferred cast-on method, feel free to use that. I'm making a small, so I'll be casting on 48 stitches. You can find the amount of stitches you'll need to cast on for your size via the link in the description. So we're going to do a 1x1 ribbing cast-on, which means we're going to alternate between doing a knit cast-on and a purl cast-on. So to begin our cast-on, we're going to create a slip stitch. And you're going to insert one of your needles into that slip stitch and tighten it up. You're going to use your other needle and knit into that slip stitch. But rather than transferring that stitch from the left to the right needle, you're going to pull that loop through and pick up that stitch with your left needle like so. And you've now created your first knit cast on. So now we're going to do a purl cast on. You're going to take your right needle and insert it between those 2 stitches on your left needle. Like this. You're going to wrap your yarn around your needle as if to purl and carefully pull that loop through those 2 stitches and use your left needle to pick up that loop. And you can always tell you've worked a purl stitch when your working yarn appears 2 stitches back like this. We're going to continue with our 1-to-1 ribbing by doing a knit cast on. So you're going to insert your right needle through those last 2 stitches from front to back, like this. You're going to wrap your yarn as if to knit, pull that loop through those last 2 stitches, and pick up that loop with your left needle. Now a purl cast on, insert your right needle back to front between those last 2 stitches, wrap your yarn as if to purl, and carefully pull that loop through those 2 stitches and pick up that loop with your left needle. So you're going to continue that pattern of knit cast on, purl cast on until you reach your required number of stitches for your size. I've also included a card to a lengthier YouTube tutorial on this alternating cast on method in case you would like a more detailed video tutorial. Once you've reached the required number of stitches for your size, this is what your cast on should look like. I'm now going to transfer my stitches over to my 4mm circular needle, which has a 23 centimeter cable. If you cast on your stitches directly on your circular needle, you can skip this step. I recommend using a 23 centimeter cable for those making an extra small, an extra small, and a small, and a 30 centimeter cable for those making a medium large or an extra large. Once you've transferred all of your stitches over to the circular needle, this is what it should look like. To work our 1x1 ribbing, we're going to alternate between knitting and purling. The first stitch is going to be a knit, followed by a purl, and then another knit, a purl, a knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. So essentially we're going to knit the knits and purl the purls. Make sure that our stitches aren't twisted so we can join them in the round, and we'll add a stitch marker to demarcate the beginning of the round. And we'll begin working our ribbing. We're going to knit 1 first. And you can see that the round has now been joined. Now we'll purl 1, And now knit one. And again, purl one. And we'll keep following this pattern of knit one, purl one, knit the knits, purl the purls until the end of the round. And this is what you should have once you reach the end of the first round. We can begin working our second round by first slipping our marker and continuing our 1x1 ribbing, starting with a knit. Because I'm making a small, I'm going to work a total of 10 rounds of 1x1 ribbing today. You can find how many rounds you need to work depending on the size that you're making via the link in the description below. Once you finish the required number of rounds for your ribbing, your work should look like this. We're now ready to work the chest section of our dog sweater. So to do this, we're going to transfer our stitches over to a 5mm circular needle that's a bit bigger. I recommend using a 30cm cable if you're making an extra small, an extra small, or a small, and using a 40cm cable if you're making a medium, large, or extra large. Today I am using a 40cm cable even though I'm making a small, but that's just because it's what I had on hand at the moment. But in general, I would recommend using a 30cm cable. Once you've transferred your stitches over to your 5mm circular needles, we can begin working the chest. And you can see here the chest is worked with a series of raglan increases. The raglan increases are made using a 2-round repeat. The first round is a simple knit. You're going to knit this entire first round. Now in round 2, we're going to work our raglan increase by working a knit front and back in the first and last stitches of the round. So in this first stitch here, we're going to do a knit front and back. To do that, we're going to knit into that first stitch normally. However, rather than letting go of that stitch, you're going to take your right needle, go to the back of that stitch, and insert your needle. And you're going to knit it. And you can now let go of that stitch from your left needle. And now you've created your first raglan increase. You're now going to knit until the last stitch of this round. Once you reach that last stitch in the round, right here, you're going to work a knit front and back. So the knit fronts and backs are worked on either side of your marker. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to knit into this stitch normally, but rather than dropping the stitch, you're going to go to the back of the stitch, insert your right needle, knit it, and then let go of that stitch from your left needle. Since I'm working a small, I'm going to continue working this 2-round repeat a total of 12 times. If you're making an extra small, you're going to work it 8 times, extra small 10 times, a medium 14 times, large 16 times, and extra large 18 times. You can also find all this information in the written pattern, which I've included a link to in the description below. Once you've completed the raglan increases for the chest, this is what your work should look like. Since I'm making a small, I now have 72 stitches on my needles. We will now work the armholes and the optional harness holes. To begin, I like to demarcate the armholes with markers, which is entirely optional. For a small, count 4 stitches in and place your marker. The armholes for the small span across 12 stitches, so we'll count 12 stitches and place a marker on the other side of the armhole. Once we've done that, we're going to do the same on the other side for the other armhole. The armhole sizes vary depending on the size you're making, so I recommend referring to the written pattern if you're making a different size. We're going to first knit 3 stitches. Once we get to the stitch before the marker, we're going to knit front and back the same way we did to work our raglan increases. You can remove your marker so we can start binding off for our armhole. We're going to begin our bind off by using that extra stitch we created with the knit front and back. This will ensure no excess gapping appears between the knitted stitches and the bind off. For the small, I'm going to bind off 12. After you bind off 12 stitches, you'll have 1 stitch left on your needle. You're going to remove your marker and slip that stitch from your right to your left needle. To finish up your first armhole, you're going to knit 2 together. You'll now knit normally until you have 17 stitches left in your round, which should bring you to 1 stitch before the marker for your second armhole. We'll work the second armhole the same way we knit our first. We'll knit front and back so we can begin our bind off using that extra stitch we created. Then we'll bind off 12 stitches. Lastly, we'll move the last stitch from the bind off from our right to our left needle and then knit 2 together. To finish the round, we'll knit the last 3 stitches. Once you've finished the round, this is what your armhole should look like. Now we need to close our armholes by casting on stitches where we previously bound off. To start, we're going to knit 4 stitches. We now need to cast on 12 stitches to make up for the 12 stitches we bound off in the previous round. You can use your preferred bind off method here. Today I'm going to use the knitted cast on method. To do this, you're going to first turn your work. You're then going to insert your right needle into the stitch you just worked. Wrap your yarn as if to knit, but instead of letting that stitch go, pick up the loop with your left needle. You've now created 1 new stitch. You're going to repeat this method 11 more times until you've created 12 new stitches. Once you've cast on 12 stitches, you can turn your work back and continue knitting normally until you reach your second armhole. We will work the second armhole the same way we worked our first. Turn your work and using the knitted cast on method, cast on 12 new stitches. Once you've cast on 12 stitches, turn your work back and finish off the round by knitting the last 4 stitches. You've now completed the armholes of your sweater. You're now going to knit one full round. You now have the option to add a harness hole. If you do not want to add one, feel free to skip ahead in this video. We're going to add a harness hole essentially the same way we made our armholes. We're going to add markers to demarcate our harness hole. For the small, count 34 stitches. Place your marker. Count 4 stitches, which will be the stitches we bind off for the harness hole and place a marker. There are 34 more stitches remaining in the round. To begin working our harness hole, we will knit 33 stitches. In the stitch right before the marker, you will knit front and back. Remove the marker, and using the extra stitch we created, begin binding off. We will bind off a total of 4 stitches. Remove the second marker and slip the remaining stitch from the bind off from the right to the left needle. Now knit 2 together. Knit until the end of the round. To close the harness hole, begin by knitting 34 stitches. Once you reach the previously bound off stitches, turn your work and cast on 4 stitches using the knitted cast on method. Turn your work back and continue knitting until the end of the round. You have now completed the harness hole. Now that we've completed the harness hole, it's time to work the midsection of the sweater until the belly ribbing. This is worked by simply knitting in stockinette until you've reached your desired length for your dog. For Mac, I'm going to be working 10 centimeters in stockinette stitch. I will meet you back here once we've completed the midsections of our sweaters. Your sweater should look something like this once you've completed the midsection in stockinette. We now will work a section of ribbing which will rest near your dog's belly. This helps the sweater fit a bit more snugly against your dog's body, and if you have a male dog, this will make it less likely that your dog pees into a sweater. Because I'm making a small, I'm going to place markers in the first and last 10 stitches of my round. We are then going to knit to the last 10 stitches in the round. When you reach that first marker, slip it and keep knitting. Now that you've reached the last 10 stitches, slip the marker and work one by one ribbing, starting with a knit. For round 2, work one by one ribbing, again starting with a knit, until you reach your first marker. Slip your marker and knit until your second marker. Slip your second marker and work one by one ribbing, starting with the knit, until the end of the round. We are going to repeat round 2 a total of 6 times. If you're making an extra small or an extra small, work round 2 a total of 5 times. For a small and a medium, work it 6 times, and for a large and an extra large, work it 7 times. Once you've completed your rounds of ribbing, your work should look like this. We will now bind off the belly ribbing portion of our sweater. To get a stretchier bind-off edge, we are going to knit the knits and purl the purls while binding off. We're going to begin by continuing with our one by one ribbing to our first marker. Slip your marker and knit until one stitch before the second marker. Like all the other times we've bound off, you are going to knit front and back. Remove your marker and use that extra stitch we created to begin binding off the belly ribbing. You're going to continue alternating between a knit and a purl while binding off. Once you reach the beginning of the round, you can now remove the marker and continue binding off to your last marker. When you reach the end of your bind-off, you can remove your last marker, slip the remaining bind-off stitch from your right to your left needle, and knit two together. We are now going to work the back section of the sweater in rows. I've included a built-in I-cord edge for my sweater so the stockinette doesn't curl so much, but feel free to work a different edge or just add pearls to your edges. We are also going to simultaneously work decreases on every knit row. I recommend referring to the written pattern if working both decreases and an I-cord edge gets a bit confusing. The I-cord for the right side is worked as a knit one, slip one purlwise, and knit one again. Since we already have a stitch on our right needle, we are going to count that as our first work knit in the I-cord edge. Therefore, we're going to slip one purlwise with the yarn in the front, and then bring our yarn to the back and knit one to finish off our I-cord. Now that we've completed our I-cord, we are going to knit one and then begin our decreases. To make a left-leaning decrease, we are going to slip, slip, knit. Slip 2 stitches knitwise and then knit them together. Now that we have completed our I-cord edge and first decrease, we are going to knit until we have 6 stitches left in the row. Now that we have 6 stitches remaining, we are going to make another decrease followed by the I-cord edge. To make a right-leaning decrease, knit 2 together. Knit 1, and work your I-cord the same way we did previously. Knit 1, slip 1 stitch purlwise, and knit 1 again. And you've now completed your first row of decreases and an I-cord edge. To work the I-cord edge on the wrong side, you are going to slip 1 stitch purlwise, bring the yarn to the back and knit 1, and slip 1 stitch purlwise again. No decreases are worked on the wrong side, so you will just purl until you have 3 stitches left. Once you reach your last 3 stitches, you are going to repeat the I-cord edge by slipping 1 stitch purlwise, bringing the yarn to the back and knitting 1, and slipping 1 stitch purlwise again. You're going to continue working this 2-row repeat for the entire length of the back of the sweater. I will run through this 2-row repeat one more time because it can be a bit confusing. For your I-cord, you're going to knit 1, slip 1 stitch purlwise holding your yarn in front, and bring your yarn to the back and knit 1 again. Knit 1 normally, and for your left-leaning decrease, slip 2 stitches knitwise, and then knit them together. Knit normally until you have 6 stitches left on your needle. For a right-leaning decrease, knit 2 together. Knit 1 normally. For your I-cord, you're going to knit 1, slip 1 stitch purlwise holding your yarn in front, and bring your yarn to the back and knit 1 again. For your I-cord on the wrong side, slip 1 stitch purlwise. Bring your yarn to the back and knit 1. Slip 1 stitch purlwise again. Since no decreases are worked on the wrong side, purl until you have 3 stitches left. Once you reach the last 3 stitches, slip 1 stitch purlwise, bring your yarn to the back and knit 1, slip 1 stitch purlwise again. I'm going to continue working this 2-row repeat until I have 28 stitches left because I'm making a small. The amount of stitches you should end with depends on the size you are making. If you prefer to make a shorter sweater for your dog, feel free to stop earlier than what's recommended for your size. This is what your work should look like once you've completed the back section of your sweater. We are now going to finish off our sweater by working some 1x1 ribbing. This will reduce any curling and also ensure the sweater fits your dog snugly. This is entirely optional, but I am going to transfer my stitches back onto my 4mm needle. I tend to knit ribbing a bit more loosely, so I like to use a smaller needle size when working my ribbing. We are now ready to work our ribbing. We are going to work our ribbing the same way we did for the neck, with the only exception being we'll knit in rows rather than in the round. We are going to always start with a knit regardless of the side. This is what your ribbing should look like after working your first row. You're going to continue working your 1x1 ribbing by knitting the knits and purling the purls. For a small, I'm going to work a total of 6 rows of ribbing. For those making an extra small and an extra small, you should work a total of 5 rows of ribbing. For a small and a medium, 6 rows, and for a large and an extra large, 7 rows. This is what your work should look like after completing your ribbing. We are now ready to bind off our work. To do this, we are going to bind off the same way we did for the belly ribbing. You are going to continue alternating between knitting and purling while binding off. This will give us a clean, stretchy edge. You can now pull that last stitch long and cut your yarn. And that's it! You've finished your sweater. All that's left to do now is weave in your ends and try it on your dog. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this knitting tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Thanks!